It was the kind of day that felt wrapped in sleep. The grey sky hovered low over Spokane, its clouds smudged like soot on glass. Drizzle tapped softly on the sidewalks, and the cold settled like dust in Noah Crane's jacket collar as he ducked into Tony's Trade and Treasure, the kind of pawn shop that time had given up on organizing. Noah wasn't supposed to be here, not really. He had come to this part of town to scout filming locations for a short documentary he was cobbling together about forgotten musicians and the things they left behind. Mostly it was an excuse, a distraction from the creeping sense that his own music, his own stories might also be drifting into obscurity. Still, he found himself pushing the shop door open, a rusted bell jingling from somewhere above, announcing his entrance like a half-hearted sigh. The place smelled of old wood, engine grease, and 1,000 untold secrets. It was cluttered in the way only pawn shops can be, shelves stacked with cracked amps, dusty vinyl records, tangled cords, half-melted lava lamps, pocket knives, tarnished belt buckles. Somewhere in the back a radio buzzed softly between stations, unable to settle on one voice long enough to finish a sentence. Noah walked in slowly, eyes trailing over the mess. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe he never had been. But then, tucked behind a pile of chipped amps and a speaker duct-taped into submission, he saw it. A guitar, cherry sunburst, acoustic, worn smooth along the edges like it had been played not just often but lovingly. The strings were dull, and the tuning pegs looked like they hadn't been touched in years, but still, it had presence. It stood like it was waiting for someone. He knelt down, brushing off a layer of dust, and carefully opened the case. The scent hit him first: musty velvet, wood, thyme. The inside was a soft, faded red, like wine left out in the sun. Nestled within was the guitar, and just beneath the neck strap, tucked almost invisibly under the lining, was a pale tag. E. Matheson black ink, faded handwriting, almost gone, but still there, like it refused to disappear. Noah stared at the name for a long moment. Something about it curled at the edges of his mind like smoke. It didn't spark immediate recognition, but it felt important, like a name you'd forgotten from a dream. And there was something else. Wedged beneath the soft red lining in the slim groove meant for storing picks and strings was a small folded piece of paper. He opened it carefully, the paper fragile as dried leaves. Inside, a single line: "Don't follow ghosts, unless they play music." He let out a short breath, not sure why the words hit him so hard. Something about the phrasing felt personal, not cryptic, not poetic, just real. Like whoever had written it knew that one day someone would need to hear it. The shopkeeper, a wiry man in a camo vest, emerged from the back room and gave Noah a once-over. "She's been sitting there for years," he said, nodding toward the guitar. "No one's wanted her. You want it?" Noah didn't answer right away. He ran his fingers gently across the strings. The sound was dry, but the body of the guitar vibrated faintly beneath his palm, like a pulse trying to wake up. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'll take it." He didn't know why, just that he had to. He bought the guitar for $100 and walked out of the pawn shop, the rain still falling in fine mist, soaking into his jacket. He felt ridiculous, walking with an old instrument slung over his back like a bard from a bygone century. But beneath the ridiculousness, a feeling had started to bloom, strange, electric, and unfamiliar. It felt like the beginning of something. What he didn't know, couldn't have known, was that the name E. Matheson belonged to a man who once stood on the same stages Noah had dreamed of. A man whose final song had never been heard, a man who disappeared without a trace 29 years ago. And that man was his father. Noah waited until the sky had deepened into evening before showing her the guitar. Somehow it didn't feel right to bring it in under sunlight. The apartment was quiet, save for the low hum of the dishwasher in the kitchen and the soft ticking of the old clock Leah kept on the mantel, one that had never quite told the right time. She was in the living room, folding laundry with practiced slowness, as though each shirt or towel had its own memory. The TV murmured in the background, but she wasn't watching it. She rarely did. These days, her eyes seemed always on something invisible, fixed on corners of the room where ghosts might have once stood. Noah stepped in, holding the guitar case by its handle, his fingers unconsciously gripping it tighter than they needed to. "Hey, Mom," he said. She looked up, a little startled. "You're home early." "Yeah," he replied, almost awkwardly. I found something. Thought you might recognize it." He set the case down on the coffee table and slowly opened the latches, careful not to say anything just yet. The lid creaked as it lifted, and the dim light from the table lamp caught the soft gleam of the wood inside. She looked at it once, then again, and the third time she didn't blink. Her hands stopped folding the towel in her lap. She leaned forward, as if the space between her and the guitar had suddenly stretched unbearably wide. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her fingers trembled slightly, and Noah saw it, saw the change in her, like something long frozen had just begun to thaw. "Where did you get this?" she asked quietly. "A pawn shop in Spokane. It was buried in the back. I wasn't even looking for anything, really. I saw it, and—" He hesitated. "I felt something. I don't know why." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the case, her fingers brushing the neck of the guitar like it might vanish if she held it too tightly. Her expression had cracked open, something between awe and grief. Then she found the tag. Her breath hitched. "E. Matheson," she whispered, and sat back like the name itself had knocked the air from her lungs. Noah sat beside her, unsure if he should speak. The silence stretched, thick and waiting. "I think that's my dad's name," he said carefully. "Isn't it?" She closed her eyes. For a long moment she didn't move. Then, without looking at him, she nodded. "Yes," she said. "Eli Matheson. Your father." It was the first time he'd ever heard her say it. A name. A real one. The room felt like it had changed shape, like the walls had leaned in closer just to listen. "I thought you said he left?" Noah asked, his voice soft. She nodded again, but slower this time. "He did, but not the way people think." There was a long pause. The dishwasher beeped from the kitchen. She didn't move to turn it off. "He was a musician," she continued. "Played at little clubs, open mics. Said music was his compass, his lifeline. But he had enemies too, people who didn't want him to say what he was saying in his songs. He was brave, reckless, stupidly kind, and he loved you, Noah, even though he never met you." He blinked. "Wait, he didn't leave you?" She shook her head, finally meeting his eyes. Her own were glossy now, filled with a kind of sorrow that had clearly been sitting untouched for decades. "No, he disappeared. One night, after a gig, just gone. No trace. Police said he walked away. I knew better, but I was pregnant, and no one believed me. And after a while—" She swallowed hard. "After a while, I stopped telling people you had a father at all. It was easier than saying you had a mystery." Noah didn't speak. He didn't know how to. His fingers brushed against the strings, and they hummed beneath his touch, as if the guitar remembered too. For 27 years, he'd been told not to ask. And now, in one quiet night, the truth had begun to unfold. And it was only just beginning. Back in the autumn of 1996, Seattle felt like a city constantly on the brink of something, some wild invention, some aching discovery, or some collapse waiting just around the corner. The rain had become a kind of background music, tapping out its endless rhythm on cafe windows, guitar cases, and rusted alley drains. And tucked between the grunge boom's fading echoes and the coffee shop poets was Eli Matheson, a musician whose songs didn't shout so much as ache. He wasn't famous, not really, but in those tight-knit, dimly lit venues that smelled of beer, sweat, and heartbreak, Eli had become a name you didn't forget. His lyrics didn't rhyme neatly, and his voice cracked more often than not. But somehow that imperfection was the point. People said he wrote the kind of songs that felt like they had lived longer than he had, songs that came from somewhere deeper than most of us could name. He was tall, unshaven, always in the same worn-out coat with frayed sleeves, and always with that guitar, a 1963 Gibson Dove with a cracked pickguard and a tone so warm it made you feel like you were being told a secret. That night, October 21st, 1996, was supposed to be his break. Not a record deal, not a sold-out stadium, but a bigger crowd than usual. Word had spread about this ghost-voiced guy in Capitol Hill who could turn your worst memories into lullabies. Leah was in the crowd, belly swollen beneath her jacket. She was 8 months pregnant and had come to hear the new song Eli had promised to debut. He'd written it just days before, said it had come to him in a dream, and he had no choice but to play it. The venue was called the Hollow Lantern, and that night the lights were dimmer than usual, the air thick with cigarette smoke and anticipation. Eli stepped onto the stage with the slow gait of someone about to read their diary aloud. He didn't say much, just gave a small nod, settled onto a wooden stool, and strummed a chord that made the room go silent like someone had flipped a switch. Then came the song, Driftwood Sky. Nobody there that night could ever quite describe it afterward. They'd try, use words like mournful, haunting, otherworldly, but all of them admitted it felt like something he wasn't just performing, but confessing. The final chorus was barely a whisper. His eyes closed, his voice trembled, and when it ended, no one clapped. Not immediately. It was like they were holding their breath, afraid that any sound would break whatever spell had just been cast. Then he smiled, bowed his head, and said softly into the mic, "That was for the ones who never get to say goodbye." He packed up his guitar, hugged a few people, kissed Leah's cheek, and promised to meet her at home after dropping off a cassette at the studio. He never arrived. The last confirmed sighting of Eli Matheson was at 11:42 p.m. He was caught on grainy gas station footage, walking alone down a rain-slicked alley, his guitar case in one hand, the other hand tucked in his coat pocket. He looked calm, thoughtful, like a man walking towards something important. The next morning, his car was found a few blocks from the venue. Inside was his wallet, keys still in the ignition, and a cigarette that had burned all the way down to the filter in the ashtray. The door was unlocked. His coat lay neatly folded on the passenger seat. His guitar was gone, and Eli, just like his final note that night, vanished into silence. Police called it voluntary disappearance, a man overwhelmed by impending fatherhood. Say musician drowning in the weight of a dream slipping through his fingers. But those who knew him knew better. You don't leave behind your guitar, you don't walk away after that song, and you don't vanish just days before your child is born, not unless someone or something makes you disappear. It had been 3 nights since Noah brought the guitar home. 3 nights of strange, unsettled sleep, and a feeling he couldn't quite name, something between awe and unease, like standing at the edge of a long-forgotten doorway with a key you didn't know you were carrying. The guitar hadn't left his room. He'd placed it gently on a stand beside his window, where it caught the morning light just so, making the faded wood seem richer than it was. There was something almost alive about it, as if it was waiting, watching, remembering. That morning, just as the sun filtered weakly through the blinds, Noah sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, the case open before him. The velvet interior looked like bruised wine, its seams threadbare, its lining slumped with age. He ran his fingers along the edge of the case, half out of habit, half out of some quiet instinct he couldn't explain. And that's when he felt it. A ridge, a lift in the lining, barely noticeable but not natural. Curious, he pried gently beneath the flap. Something gave with a faint tear. Beneath the velvet, in a small pocket stitched into the fabric, lay 3 things: a folded scrap of paper, a black and white photograph, and a yellowed lyric sheet, creased down the middle like it had been read again and again. He stared at them for a long time before picking them up. The photograph was first. It was small, wallet-sized. A candid shot of his mother, younger, glowing, laughing. One hand rested on her belly, swollen with pregnancy. Her other arm was wrapped around a tall man with wild hair and kind, tired eyes. He looked at her like she was the song he'd been trying to write his whole life. Noah's breath caught in his throat. There was no doubt. This was his father. This was Eli Matheson. He had never seen the man's face before, never heard his voice, but here he was, frozen in time, in love, and unknowingly a ghost to the boy staring back at him. He set the photo down gently, hands trembling, and unfolded the lyric sheet. The title at the top read, Driftwood Sky. The handwriting was uneven, scratched with urgency, raw, emotional. Noah read the lyrics slowly, his eyes moving over each line like decoding a memory that wasn't his. It was beautiful, painful. The words didn't rhyme perfectly. Some lines crossed out, others circled and rewritten. It wasn't polished, it was real. And it held something more than melody. It held goodbye. The final verse was different. It wasn't even part of the song, really. It looked like something added later, scrawled sideways across the bottom. The weight of sound can sink you, but it can also show you where to surface. Then he turned to the smallest paper, folded into a tight square. As he opened it, his heartbeat quickened. It was just one line, written in the same hand, but somehow sharper, like it had been written with intention, like it knew it would be read one day. Don't follow ghosts unless they play music. Noah read it again, then again. His throat tightened. It was eerie, almost theatrical, like something from a lyric or a novel, but something about it pierced him. It felt aimed, not at some faceless stranger, but at him. A message whispered across years, a challenge, a warning, or maybe an invitation. He closed the guitar case slowly, as though sealing a secret inside it once again. But the weight of it now felt heavier. It no longer held just wood and strings. It held proof, history, clues. His father hadn't left nothing behind. He'd left breadcrumbs. And Noah, filmmaker, musician, the son of a vanished man, had just picked up the first one. Something inside Noah had shifted. It wasn't just the photograph or the lyrics or the cryptic message hidden in the guitar case. It was the realization that his father, this man who had lived only in shadows and half-truths, wanted to be found. And not by anyone. By him. Noah had never believed much in destiny, but now it felt less like a grand idea and more like a quiet pull, a tug in his chest that refused to let go. So he followed it. He started with the obvious: online newspaper archives, digitized obituaries, missing persons databases. Eli Matheson's name brought up exactly 4 local articles from 1996, all brief, all vague. Musician goes missing after Capitol Hill gig. No foul play suspected. The headlines felt sterile, rushed, written to be forgotten. But the more Noah read, the more things didn't sit right. Eli's disappearance had occurred less than a month before Noah was born. He had vanished after playing one of the most talked-about shows of his short-lived career. He had no history of running away, no record of debt or violence. Yet the articles were strangely matter-of-fact. No follow-ups, no quotes from friends or family. Just a few dry lines about a man who walked off into the rain and never returned. It felt incomplete. Noah drove to Seattle the next morning, a thermos of bitter coffee in his cup holder and Eli's guitar in the back seat. He spent hours in the public library's microfilm room, hunched over a glowing screen, turning reel after reel like pages of a novel written in static and ink. The deeper he went, the more frayed the story became. There had been witnesses. One bartender mentioned a strange man in a trench coat loitering outside the Hollow Lantern the night of Eli's gig. Never followed up. A taxi driver claimed to have picked up a man carrying a guitar case just 3 blocks from the venue. Never confirmed. One report suggested Eli had gone to a recording studio that same night, but no address was ever listed, and the statement was buried in a footnote. Worse still, the missing persons report had been filed late. According to the records, Leah's initial call was marked as non-urgent. The file noted that she was emotional and potentially unreliable due to pregnancy-related stress. That line made Noah's stomach turn. He requested a copy of the police file and surprisingly received it without much pushback. It was thin, unreasonably so. Most pages were vague, repetitive, or redacted. No fingerprints were taken from Eli's car. No prints lifted from the door handle. The guitar's disappearance wasn't even mentioned. It was as if someone wanted the story to vanish right along with him. That night, Noah sat in a small hotel room overlooking Elliott Bay, the lights of the city flickering across the water like restless memories. He spread out his notes across the bed. Printouts, photocopies, scribbled theories. In the center of it all was the photo of his father holding his mother, both of them laughing, young, unaware of the silence to come. There was something here. He could feel it. Not just the weight of the past, but the suggestion that someone had buried it, chosen to forget it, or worse, made sure others would. And as Noah stared at the photo, he realized something he hadn't before. Eli wasn't just gone. He had been erased. The name didn't jump out right away. It was buried, like most things in Eli's case, in a forgotten corner of a box Noah had requested from a retired journalist's estate. A box labeled Seattle Arts 9697 and left to gather dust in a dim library basement, its contents donated after the reporter passed away. Noah almost missed it, a folded flyer, brittle and water-stained, advertising the Hollow Lanterns Fall Showcase. At the bottom, in fine print, was a line of credits. Booking and Management, V. Deloria Promotions. Noah narrowed his eyes. Something about the name Deloria stirred the air around him. He spent the rest of the afternoon tracing it, through old articles, business filings, and a now-defunct website captured by the Wayback Machine. In the 90s, Vince Deloria had been a name whispered in local music circles. Not flashy, not famous, but powerful in the way shadows are, present, controlling, and always behind someone else's spotlight. He had represented 3 artists who vanished from public life within 5 years. One had overdosed, one had disappeared to South America, and one, Eli Matheson, had simply ceased to exist. Now Vince Deloria lived in a gated estate just outside Portland, wealthy, retired, and according to a neighborhood article Noah found, completely unreachable. But Noah had never been especially good at taking no for an answer. He arrived at Vince's estate the following week. It was sprawling and severe, high hedges, a long gravel drive. The house itself looked like it had been designed to keep things out, or perhaps to keep something in. Noah stood at the gate, guitar case on his back, heart hammering against his ribs. He pressed the intercom button, static. Then a voice, raspy, slow, older. "Yes?" "I'm Noah Crane," he said. "I think you knew my father, Eli Matheson." A long pause, then a buzz. The gate creaked open like a secret it didn't want to share. Vince Deloria was older than Noah expected. Gaunt, pale, with a thin silver ponytail and a smoker's voice that dragged like gravel. He didn't shake hands, just gestured toward the patio with a half-smoked cigar and muttered, "Say what you came to say." Noah placed the guitar on the table between them. Vince's eyes didn't leave it, not even for a second. "Recognize it?" Noah asked. Silence. Then Vince exhaled slowly. "I haven't seen that guitar in 29 years. So you do know who it belonged to?" "Everyone in Seattle knew who it belonged to," Vince said, his voice distant. "Eli didn't play music. He bled it. Trouble was, he started bleeding too close to things he shouldn't have." Noah leaned forward. "What things?" Vince didn't answer. Instead, he reached for a glass of something amber and sipped it. His hand trembled slightly. "Your father was brilliant. Maybe too brilliant. He wanted to say everything, truth, lies, secrets, shadows, but some truths aren't meant to be sung." "You mean Driftwood Sky?" Vince's eyes flickered. "He told you about that?" "I read his lyrics. I have his notes. I know he was planning to confront you that night. I want to know why." At that, Vince looked directly at him for the first time. His eyes were glassy and gray, like winter water, and in them, Noah saw not just age, but fear. "I don't know what you think you're digging up," Vince said slowly, "but let me give you something useful. There are ghosts in this world, boy, and the smart ones don't chase them." Noah held his ground. "I'm not chasing. I'm following a trail, my father's." Vince laughed, quiet and humorless. Then he stood, turned away and muttered over his shoulder, "Some ghosts need to stay buried." He left Noah alone with the guitar and the wind. But it was too late for warnings. Noah had already started unburying the truth, and something told him it wasn't done with him yet. The tip came on a rainy Thursday morning. An anonymous message slipped under the door of the small motel Noah was staying in, written in hurried, almost illegible handwriting. "If you want the truth, look where the music ended. Find the old studio near Green Lake Woods. You'll find what he left behind." Noah folded the note slowly, heart thudding like a drumbeat in a long-forgotten song. Green Lake Woods wasn't far from Seattle's edges, a dense patch of fir and cedar trees that swallowed sound and light alike, the kind of place where secrets could live for decades without fear of discovery. He drove there that afternoon, the sky thick with grey clouds that promised rain but hadn't yet delivered. The road narrowed and twisted until the pavement ended in gravel and then dirt. His car bumped along the unkempt path until the trees opened up onto a small clearing, where the skeleton of a building sat half-hidden beneath moss and creeping ivy. It was a studio, or what was left of one. The faded sign above the cracked doorway read, "Harbor Sound Studios," its letters peeling like old paint on a weathered fence. The windows were dark, some shattered, letting the cold wind whistle inside. The door hung crooked on one hinge, as if inviting him in but warning him not to stay long. Noah's breath fogged the chill air as he stepped inside. The studio was a husk of its former self. Equipment lay scattered, broken speakers, empty cassette cases, tangled wires like vines choking the floor. A thick layer of dust covered every surface, disturbed only where the wind had swept through broken panes. His footsteps echoed through the cavernous space, stirring memories he couldn't see but felt heavy in the silence. As he moved toward the control room, something caught his eye. A metal panel behind a soundproof wall, warped but clearly out of place. It looked like a safe embedded into the wall, painted the same dull grey as the cracked plaster. His heart quickened. Noah crouched down and ran his fingers over the cold surface. There was a small combination lock. He hadn't expected this, but somewhere deep in his mind, a whisper told him this was it, the secret his father had left behind. After a moment's hesitation, he pulled out a small toolkit he always carried in his backpack, a habit from years of filmmaking, repairing cameras and cobbling together gear. Carefully, methodically, he worked on the lock, listening to the tiny clicks until the mechanism gave way. With a soft thud, the safe door swung open. Inside was a small trove, a cassette tape with a handwritten label, Final Cut EM, yellowed and fragile, a leather-bound notebook, its edges worn and pages dog-eared, and a folded sheet of paper, creased like a map. Noah's fingers trembled as he lifted the tape first. He ran the cassette under the light, noticing the faint smell of smoke and old paper. Then he opened the notebook, revealing pages filled with lyrics, scribbles, and notes, unfinished songs, thoughts jotted between the lines. On one page, in bold letters, was a title, Noah's Sky. His name. The realization hit him like a wave. Eli had known Noah, had written for him, about him, even before Noah's birth. He unfolded the creased sheet next. It was a letter, unfinished, written in Eli's hurried script. "If you find this, son, know that I never stopped trying. They wanted my silence, but my song will speak for me. You are my last hope, my brightest sky." Noah swallowed hard, the room spinning around him. He carefully placed the items on a dusty table and searched for a way to play the tape. Against all odds, he found an old cassette player in a corner, plugged it in, and pressed play. Eli's voice filled the room, raw, trembling, alive. The tape was a confession, a farewell, and a plea all wrapped in one. As the music and words swirled through the studio's broken walls, Noah felt his father's presence, not just in the notes, but in the silence between them. This was more than a discovery. It was a beginning. The cassette player clicked and whirred, its old motor coughing back to life after years of silence. Noah sat still, breath caught somewhere between hope and dread, as the tiny spool inside began to spin, and then the sound. At first it was just static, a soft hiss like the ocean far off in the distance. Then through the crackling a voice emerged. It was hesitant at first, a whisper tangled with fear and exhaustion, but unmistakably his father's voice. "Hey Noah, if you're listening to this," Eli began, his words fragile as a candle flame flickering in the dark. "I don't know if you're real, if you ever will be, but this is my story, my truth. And if I don't make it out tonight, I want you to know who I was." Noah's fingers tightened around the guitar case resting beside him. His heart felt like it was pounding in his throat, the room suddenly too small to hold the weight of what he was about to hear. Eli's voice cracked, breaking through the years like a ghost finally finding its words. "I had to leave, not because I wanted to, but because they wanted me silent. Vince, he isn't just a manager. Not to me. He was a shadow, a cage, the kind of man who smiles while he tightens the noose." Noah flinched at the name Vince Deloria, familiar now, like a dark stain that refused to wash away. "I wrote songs that weren't just melodies. They were weapons, stories that tore at the lies in this town. I saw what they wanted to hide: corruption, greed, people who thought they could own everything. I was getting too close, too loud." The voice trembled, a long pause, then a shaky breath. "Vince warned me once. He said, 'Eli, some truths don't need light. They need silence.' But silence isn't peace. It's a cage with invisible bars." Noah's eyes stung. The room around him seemed to blur as if the past was bleeding into the present. "I recorded this because I knew something might happen, because sometimes bravery means knowing you might never get the chance to say goodbye. And I want you, my son, to hear it, to understand that you are more than the silence left behind." The tape continued, a fragile confession unfolding in the dark. There was a meeting planned that night. A confrontation. I wanted to stand up, face Vince, tell him I wouldn't be a pawn anymore, but they were watching, waiting. Noah swallowed hard. "If you ever find this, don't hate the man who disappeared. Hate the reasons he had to, and promise me you'll keep singing, even when it feels like the world has gone quiet." The voice faltered. "I wrote a song for you, Noah's Sky, because even in the darkest night there's a place where the sky stretches wide, endless and free. That's where I am, son, waiting for you." The tape hissed and sputtered, Eli's voice fading like the last ember of a fire. When it finally ended, a silence heavier than any noise filled the room. Noah sat back, tears streaming unbidden down his cheeks. The man he never knew, his father, had spoken to him across time, through fear and hope and love. He was no longer just a ghost in old stories. He was a man, a father, who had fought in shadows so his son might live in light. And now it was Noah's turn to carry that song forward. The first time Noah hit upload, he felt a strange mixture of hope and fear, like setting a message adrift on a stormy sea. The music, the story, his father's voice carried through the digital ether, waiting to be heard by a world that had forgotten Eli Matheson long ago. But the world was listening. The response was immediate and electric. Social media ignited with whispers and roars. Hashtags trended overnight. Hashtag Eli Matheson. Hashtag Driftwood Sky. Hashtag Noah's Sky. Each one a thread weaving a tapestry of rediscovery and reverence. The music, once silent and buried, now pulsed through speakers and headphones in every corner of the globe. Noah watched in disbelief as old fans resurfaced from the shadows of forgotten forums and dusty record collections. People who had stood in smoky clubs, clutching beer bottles and memories, suddenly found their own pasts breathing again. They shared stories of Eli's haunting melodies, the promise in his voice, the heartbreak of his disappearance. Reporters, sensing the tide, dove into the story with renewed urgency. Long silent news desks resurrected files and interviewed witnesses. The whispers of corruption and silence became headlines. The cold case, once gathering dust on forgotten shelves, was cracked open by detectives determined to find the truth. Leah, Noah's mother, watched it all from their small home, her eyes shining with a bittersweet pride. She had carried the secret for so long, and now it was like the weight of a lifetime was lifting, replaced by something fragile but unbreakable: hope. Noah became more than a filmmaker or a musician. He became the voice of a story that had waited decades to be told. He held concerts in small theaters and large halls, playing Noah's Sky live, his father's words alive on his lips, his fingers dancing over strings that once belonged to a man who had vanished but never truly gone. Each note carried the weight of loss and the promise of renewal. The crowd sang along, their voices joining across generations, a chorus that refused to be silenced. News cameras captured his every move. Questions came fast and furious. How did he find the guitar? What did the tapes reveal? Was he afraid to unearth the past? But Noah's answers were simple. "This isn't just my story," he said once, voice steady, but filled with emotion. "It's a story about truth, about family, about the music that connects us all, even across time and silence." The reopened investigation unearthed new leads. Old witnesses who had stayed silent now spoke. The police followed threads that led to long-hidden secrets, challenging the shadows that had kept Eli's fate a mystery. And as the world learned more about Eli Mathieson, the man, the musician, the father, they celebrated a legacy reborn. His songs climbed charts decades after his voice had fallen silent. Vinyl pressings sold out. Tributes poured in from artists inspired by the raw honesty and haunting beauty of his work. Noah stood backstage at one such tribute, the crowd's cheers swelling through the walls. He held the guitar, worn and weathered, but alive with memory, and felt a quiet connection, a bridge between past and present, loss and love. In that moment, he understood what Eli had meant by Noah's sky. It was a sky that stretched beyond grief, beyond absence, into a space where music and memory could live forever. And under that endless sky, the son who never knew his father had become the keeper of his song. The world felt different now, no longer a place haunted by the silence of a lost father, but alive with the echoes of a legacy reclaimed. Noah stood on the small stage of a crowded music hall, his fingers resting gently on the strings of Eli's Gibson Dove. The worn wood seemed to hum beneath his touch, a silent witness to the journey they had both traveled, father and son, separated by years but joined by the unbreakable thread of music. Behind him, a packed room filled with faces both new and familiar. Fans who had never known Eli were now singing his songs with reverence. Old friends who had mourned his disappearance now wept with relief and joy. Reporters, once skeptical, now spoke of Eli Mathieson as a symbol of courage, a man who dared to sing truths others feared. Noah's gaze swept across the crowd, his heart full but heavy with the weight of the past. He thought of his mother, who had carried the secret for so long. Of the dark nights spent searching through archives, the broken studios, the cryptic messages tucked inside a guitar case. But most of all, he thought of Eli, the man who had vanished beneath shadows but left behind a song that refused to die. As the first notes of Noah's sky floated through the air, Noah closed his eyes and let the music carry him. Every chord, every word was a conversation across time, a promise kept, a story told. This was no longer just a song for the past. It was a beacon for the future, for every child who grew up without a piece of their history, for every artist whose voice trembled with fear and hope, for every soul searching for light in the darkness. Noah's voice soared, filled with the raw emotion of a son who had found his father not in the flesh, but in the music that outlasted even the longest silence. When the last note faded, the applause was thunderous. But Noah didn't hear it, not fully. His heart was already looking forward, because the story didn't end here. It was a beginning, a legacy reborn and carried forward by a son who refused to let the music die. As the crowd began to disperse, a young girl approached him. She held out a small notebook, worn at the edges. "Your dad's music helped me through hard times," she said shyly. "Thank you." Noah smiled, tears prickling his eyes. "That means more than you know," he whispered. Outside, the city lights twinkled beneath a vast sky, endless and free. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Eli's song was still playing, soft and steady, as if telling them both that no matter what the future held, their story would always be carried on the wind.